Monday, November 9th, 2020, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. So it's just gone past 2 p.m. London time. I made my video this morning. Yes, the stock market was up a little bit. Gold and silver were doing pretty well. Bond markets were steady. And as I speak now, the Dow is up over 1,600 points. The 10-year yield is up about 10 basis points. Gold and silver have plummeted because of news of a new vaccine from Pfizer. And it's interesting because I've been reading a book that I read many years ago. I started reading again yesterday, this book. It's entitled The Rothschilds, The Financial Rulers of Nations by John Reeves. It was written back in the 1880s, so it's an old book. Here you go. And I'm up to chapter 3, and it's very interesting how the business of that family evolved. Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who was born in Frankfurt in the 1740s, he started out to become a rabbi. Then he switched to banking, and he had a small business, coin collecting, coin dealing, antiques, and eventually it grew into helping princes and kings. And eventually, after he died, his sons really built up the business. And basically, they invented the government bond market back in the early or first half of the 1800s. And that's where I am right now in the section of the book. And I just took a few minutes away from watching the madness of the financial markets to read again this book. And it caught my attention what they said about government bond markets back in the day, and also the stock market. And it reminded me exactly of what's going on today. So I'm going to go through some excerpts here from the book on chapter 3. So this is what it says. And this is the progress of the firm, chapter 3. This is after Mayer Amschel, the founder of the House of Rothschild, died. From 1812, the firm quitted the old conventional paths and struck out a new line of business, which it has made peculiarly its own. Its fortunes and its resources had then grown so large that the old banking operations were no longer worthy of its attention. Government business, such as issuing state loans and the emission of government funds, proved more congenial and no doubt more profitable, so that we find the firm between 1812 and 1830 engaged in the transaction of a series of vast operations which raised it to a position of power no other firm has ever attained. Its influence was so all-powerful that it was a saying, no war could be undertaken without the assistance of the Rothschilds, since the control exercised by them on the money markets was such that they could effectually withhold or procure the requisite funds. Before I go further, I like to say this book, the author is not just critical of the Rothschilds or praising of the Rothschilds. I highly recommend this book if you want to have like a neutral view of the family, how they started out and how they evolved. So let's continue here. The inauguration of this new business, so that's the government bond market basically, opened up a new field of industry, if we may so call it, which possessed such attractions in the shape of facilities for making and losing money that it soon became popular. Every year the business and government funds increased in value and importance, for the advantages the funds possessed were so many and so great that merchants and persons of every rank and station hastened to invest in them. By the purchase of government securities, the buyer knows he holds the best security for his money, since the credit and solvency of the country are pledged to him. And as it is the greatest public importance to preserve these uninjured, so his security is practically safe from destruction. I would beg to differ, of course. Now, 140 years later, of course, we know that that isn't the case. No other way of investing money with equal safety exists, for in private enterprises in which the security may be goods or landed property, the whole capital may suddenly be lost by fraud, fire, and other accidental causes. Then again, an investor can rely with certainty on regularly receiving a fixed interest on his capital, whereas were he to invest his money otherwise, the interest would be dependent on contingencies beyond his control. So what's the big thing that made the Rothschild family so wealthy and powerful? Well, I think it was the development of the government bond market. And that's why we're continuing to see it balloon as it has with the central banks. They started out small, of course. They started out helping out like the Prince of Hesse and Kassel, the Landgrave, he was called, to help him protect his wealth when Napoleon invaded Frankfurt. And then he started lending money to Denmark back in, I think, 1808 to 1812. Denmark was in trouble, the monarchy there. And then they helped Wellington as well with the transport of coins or specie to Spain during the Napoleonic Wars. So they gained the confidence of princes and kings, and from that the business really grew. So let's continue here. Another advantage, and a very great one, is that anyone can purchase what amount of government stock he pleases, and in this way make use all the money he can command. He is not limited to a round sum, as would be the case if he lent his capital on mortgage, which might demand either a larger or smaller amount than at his disposal for the time being. But in government stock, he can invest the amount down to the last shilling. Most government stocks are negotiable in all leading European markets, so that their popularity may be due in no small measure to their portable and sellable qualities. And that's another interesting point that he makes there. All the major European markets. That's why the Rothschilds had the five brothers. One came to London, one went to Paris, one went to Vienna, one went to Naples, and one stayed in Frankfurt. They helped really build that government bond market. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to praise anyone here. I'm just giving you the facts. And we're coming to the stock market soon. And this is what was really interesting, reading this right now and seeing what's going on. But we need to be patient. It is scarcely to be wondered at that the demand for these stocks was forever increasing, and that the business done in them, in addition to the intrinsic value of the stocks, an additional value was derived from the speculation which took place in them. And this is not the stock market. This is not equities. This is stock of government funds, right? That's how they used to speak back then. By the exercise of a certain amount of shrewdness and aided by good fortune in the choice of the moment for buying or selling, it was possible to make hitherto unheard of gains. The possibility naturally caused a general desire to share in such easily earned profits. And in this way, speculation went on increasing. In the course of time, when the public appetite for investing was no longer appeased by government funds, stocks and shares of every description were issued and snatched up with avidity. So what happened there is that the government bond market preceded the equity market. It got so huge, and people got tired or bored with the speculation there. Maybe it became less volatile, so they started going towards equity markets and even commodities. And I would say as well, one of the reasons the government bond market grew so much is because of taxation. You had to start taxing the public in order to service the government bond market. That's why it was so important when the Federal Reserve was created in 1913 to bring back the IRS so you could have a taxing authority. That's why taxing is so important for these people. Year after year, speculation grew and gradually degenerated into one vast system of gambling. And I would say it's the same thing today. No objection can be raised to legitimate purchases or sales of stocks. But since the bulk of stock exchange business has been based on speculation, there can be no doubt that the effects are far from beneficial. When it is possible to make enormous and fabulous gains with comparatively no exertion by operations on the stock exchange, it would be surprising if many businessmen were not found to quit the old paths in which their fathers made their fortunes by steady, persevering industry to enter upon one surrounded with such rosy allurements where failure appears out of the question. And I would say when there is failure now, the government and the taxpayer have to finance it, right? And this part here I think is really relevant today, not just back in the 1830s or 1880s. It says the commerce of a country must be affected by this endless speculation, as the amount of capital sunk in keeping stocks up at fictitious prices must at times be immense. To make matters worse, everything imaginable is done to encourage the speculation. The disclosures recently made in connection with the managers of several of the London banks prove with ease unscrupulous persons might without means embark in speculations amounting to hundreds of thousands of pounds. How largely chance enters into the stock exchange operations is shown by the custom of buying or selling for delivery at some future date. Well, that's the derivatives market already back in the 1800s, futures, right? Especially what's happening today. We need to not take our eyes off the ball, off the truth, that this is all fake. All these values that we're seeing on the screens, Dow above 30,000, bond markets with yields that don't really make any sense, gold and silver being suppressed. I think we need to be patient, and we need to know that this is just like gambling. So there you go. Weimar Germany, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, even Brazil, some 20, 30 years ago when they had massive inflation. Yeah, the stock market and the stock indices looked like they're going through the roof. It looked like everything was fine, but it was all fake, and it was all at the expense of the real economy. And it's happening in the United States today and everywhere else around the world, I would say. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms below. I wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye.